Lars. Together, we can forge a new beginning for America.
I want to make sure every American is listening today.
This is the Lars Larson Show.
When Lars talks, he talks for me. Our President Lars.
Broadcasting to the entire country from the left coast of America.
If there's someone with a grenade launcher outside the Capitol today, I want him shot in the head.
Now, honestly provocative talk with Lars Larson.
Welcome back to the Lars Larson Show. Glad to be with you, and we've got a lot to talk about tonight, but I don't want to make Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker wait even one more minute on hold to talk to him tonight. How are you doing, Governor?
Hey, I'm doing quite well. Thanks for having me on.
Boy, you've really lit a fire on a few different issues tonight. Why don't we start with Hillary Clinton, because there are 7,000 new emails being dumped out tonight by the State Department, and we're told that at least 150 of them involve classified materials. What does that say about Hillary Clinton as a potential candidate for President of the United States?
Well, I think it's yet more evidence that she's not qualified to be the president. It's either illegal or incompetence. Either way, it's bad, and it doesn't make her qualified to be president. She claimed there was not sensitive information. There was. She claimed there wasn't classified information. Yet again, there's more evidence that there was. She claimed there wasn't top secret information. And this is not an email scandal. This is a national security scandal. She's threatened not just our nation's national security. She's threatened yours and mine, those of our children, and others across America. And sadly, the Chinese and Russian governments, as I've said before, probably know more about Hillary Clinton's email server than do the members of the United States Congress. And that makes her unqualified to be president of the United States.
Well, in fact, Governor Walker, haven't you gone even further, a bit further than that, by saying she's not just unqualified, she's disqualified? I
think she's absolutely disqualified. To me, you look at this, there's only one of two explanations. Either she broke the law, it is illegal to have the transfer of classified and top secret information under an unsecured, non-governmental entity. So her server, her personal server, does not qualify under the law for that. Or if she claims that somehow now that she didn't know what top secret and classified information was, then she's not competent to be the president of the United States. Either way, this has disqualified her from being president. And I think it's about time the American people, certainly you're bringing it up, others are bringing it up, but I think the American people need to stand up and say, enough is enough. She put our national security at risk. She put the national security of not just some blanket entity, but of everyday Americans at risk because of her actions.
Do you think that there should be a criminal investigation, and do you think the American public can expect a criminal investigation of a top Democrat by a Democrat DOJ?
There absolutely has to be. And when you think about the fact that the intelligence community's inspector general, this is not Reince Priebus at the RNC. This is not one of our campaigns. This is the inspector general of the very own intelligence community's inspector general is pointing this out. You've got the State Department releasing more of this information. I think it is abundantly clear. It's why we need to keep talking about it, because in the past, on issues like this, the Clintons have found a way to cover this up. We cannot cover this up. As you noted, I've said this makes her disqualified from being president. I think she needs to be held accountable for not just this, but think of all the other things. I mentioned this the other day at the Citadel. When I was in South Carolina talking to nearly 1,000 cadets at the Citadel, I noted at that point that you think about coming up in the not-too-distant future, we'll be, again, observing the anniversary of 9/11, which 9/11-2001 obviously was one of the most horrific days in American history. But a few years ago, on 9/11, we saw what happened with her actions regarding Benghazi and what happened with her actions, I should say, initially, with her thinking we should go and do what we did in Libya. And then probably one of the most outrageous things I think of her tenure as Secretary of State was the idea that she stood by the caskets of those 4 Americans who lost their lives on 9/11 in Benghazi, and she told those families that somehow these videos, this YouTube video, was responsible for that, even when she knew that wasn't. Again, time and time again, she seems to be more interested about her own political future and not about what's doing right by America.
Let me ask you about Jeb Bush. You say that he is wrong to not commit to tearing up that Iran deal on the very first day if he becomes president. What would you do?
Absolutely. I'm a day one president. To me, I believe that there's too much at stake, not only with Iran, but elsewhere around the world. There's too much at stake not to be prepared to be the president on day one. Not a week after, not a month after, not 6 months after, but on day one, you need to be able to be in a position to do something on day one. And I would terminate the deal with Iran. It is a bad deal. I know it today. The experts I've worked with, the people I've worked with have made it abundantly clear that we know this is bad for Israel, it's bad for America, it's bad for the world. I would terminate it on the very first day in office. I would reinstate the sanctions already authorized by the Congress. I'd go back to the House and the Senate and get them to pass even more crippling sanctions going forward. And then I'd convince our allies to do the same, which with our allies won't be an easy task. I'm not naive about that, but the bottom line is we have to. We have to, not only because of their illicit nuclear infrastructure, but because of, on top of that, in the short term, they're a threat to Israel and to threat to the United States. This money that's going to come from the lifting of the sanctions is going to go into places, in organizations like Hamas, the Gaza Strip, like Hezbollah in Lebanon. Those are entities that want to take out Israel, and ultimately they're behind groups that want to take us out as well. This is a bad, bad deal for America. We shouldn't have to wait. Governor Bush says he's going to wait. I say I'm going to do it on day one.
I'm talking to presidential candidate and Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker. Now, you've been getting a little bit of heat over the idea of a fence or a barrier of some kind on our northern border as well as our southern border. Frankly, I'm not opposed to the idea, although I think the more present threat is on our southern border. But you're right, there have been a number of terrorist plots that have been hatched in Canada where terrorists attempted to come into our country across that northern border, and it's wide open right now.
I'm all about border security. I've talked about it all throughout this campaign, all throughout this year. We need to secure the border and enforce the laws. Obviously, the primary focus of that being on the south, where we've got international criminal organizations penetrating our borders with drugs and firearms and people on a routine basis each and every day, which is obviously a concern for both public safety and national security. But I raised on Meet the Press, which just amazes me how some in the media, though, take things way beyond what was pointed out. I point out to Chuck Todd when he asked about that I've actually heard of late at some of our campaign events, one person in particular who I believe was retired in law enforcement, noted the concern he had was about the federal government not having enough personnel to respond to law enforcement, particularly those counties along the border, the northern border, and that he thought it was worth looking into. And I said, yeah, I think that is a legitimate issue. We should make sure that we've got the personnel to make sure that anywhere, be it at our land-based borders, be it in our water-based ports, other areas out there, we need to make sure we have the personnel to deal with issues that come up anywhere around the perimeter of the United States. That's my point was there. It was about responding to an issue that someone had brought up to me at a town hall meeting type setting, and I did think it's a legitimate issue, and I do today.
By the way, Governor, I'm glad to hear you using Israel as an example of a place that built a wall almost 500 miles long for just a few $1 billion, and it made a dramatic difference. I've been disappointed over the years that more Republicans have not used that as an example of where it can be done.
I've seen it. I've been in Israel. I've seen it. It is a combination of effectively building a wall, a fence that was put up, and then making sure they have the personnel and the technology. So that's the key. It's not just about putting the infrastructure up. It's about making sure that you staff it appropriately and you provide the appropriate level of technology to make sure that it's truly effective. They did it to try and minimize the impact from terrorists. And again, this is precisely why we should be doing it. This is not just this is much bigger than the issue of immigration. This is about securing the public safety for the people near those areas, and it is definitely about our nation's national security and about our sovereignty. Incredibly important.
Governor Walker, it's a pleasure to have you on. Thanks very much for the time.
My pleasure. Good to be with you.
Take care now. Governor Scott Walker from Wisconsin running for the Republican nomination for President of the United States. Back in a moment. You've got the Larson